RM Sotheby's is the world's largest collector car auction house by total sales. They are the preeminent market maker of high-quality collector cars and collections, regardless of size or complexity. By working in partnership with the Sotheby's team and its network of 80 offices in 40 countries, RM Sotheby's has established the largest client network of any collector car auction house in the world. Join the RM Sotheby's family by connecting with one of their car specialists at rmsotheby's.com or contact me directly at gstanley@rmsotheby's.com. LLC TLC is here to save you money on all of your vehicle purchases. LLC TLC will permanently register your classic cars in Montana to avoid any annual renewal fees. As your registered agent, they will handle everything for you so you never have to step foot in Montana. And as a listener of this podcast, LLC TLC is offering 30% off your entire package. Simply go to llctlc.com/classic or mention this podcast when you contact LLC TLC directly. Welcome to the Collector Car Podcast. All right, today we're going to cover 10 rare investment-grade cars that are flying under the radar with Tim Harris. We'll meet Tim here in a second, but before we begin, I did want to kind of review some of the results from RM Sotheby's in 2024. Now, this is from a post that they just put online. I thought it was pretty interesting and kind of gave a recap of how successful RM Sotheby's has been in somewhat of a challenging year, honestly, 2024. RM Sotheby's achieved global transaction sales of over $887 million, wow, in 2024, making it one of the most successful years in its history. With live and online auctions, sealed auctions, and private sales transactions, the company continued to connect collectors with some of the most significant and desirable cars in the world. The number reflected the strength and resilience of the market, with RM Sotheby's achieving a 96% sell-through rate across its three primary sales platforms. Further contributing to its growth, RM Sotheby's enduring partnership with Sotheby's has opened doors to significant new buyers and consignors worldwide, allowing the company to continue setting benchmarks in the collector car market. Clients from 54 countries purchased cars, while bidders from 82 countries participated, highlighting the company's truly global appeal. In 2024, 51% of bidders and 65% of buyers were new to RM Sotheby's, reinforcing its ability to bring fresh participants into the collector car community. Over 126 cars, wow, sold for over $1 million. Groundbreaking sales such as the Dare to Dream collection and continued success at Monterey Car Week exemplify RM Sotheby's ability to achieve remarkable results across high-profile events. In 2024, the company expanded its footprint with 2 new auctions in Dubai, returning to the Middle East after its first sale in the region in 2019. This area has proven to be a growing hub for buyers and sellers, enhancing RM Sotheby's global reach. Now, note from our president, Gord Duff, 2024 has been a monumental year for RM Sotheby's, marked by great achievements and landmark consignments that showcase the strength of the collector car market. From record-breaking sales like the Dare to Dream collection and Rudy Klein's legendary Junkyard to groundbreaking events such as Moto Miami and our debut in Dubai, we've continued to innovate. Now, he continues saying, at RM Sotheby's, innovation is at the core of everything we do. Although we've been in business for over 40 years, we operate with the mindset of breaking into the market, constantly pushing forward. We don't wait for the market or trends to shift. Instead, while others focus on catching up, we are already exploring new spaces, developing ideas, and shaping the future of the collector car industry. Our approach is never reactive, it's proactive, ensuring we remain at the forefront. When I step back and look at 2024, I'm constantly amazed at the caliber of cars we handle each year. Throughout the year, we had the privilege of working with some of the most significant, rare, limited production, and best-in-category cars I have ever seen. Looking to 2025, we are already preparing for our biggest European sale to date in the highly anticipated Indianapolis Motor Speedway Museum collection coming to the market. None of this would be possible without our incredible clients, dedicated team, and global community of enthusiasts. As we look to 2025 and beyond, I've never been more confident in RM Sotheby's ability to stay at the top of the industry. And I agree. It's going to be a crazy 2025. I mean, we kick it off with the Mercedes Streamliner selling, which will be incredible. It's estimated to sell above 50 million euros, which I equate to about, $57 million. And then you have the Ferrari 250 LM that won Le Mans. After that, at Retromobile, and then we have Moto Miami, where we have the other speedway cars coming up for sale, including a GT40. 2025 is really kicking off into high gear, so I can't wait to see what happens. Speaking of high gear, now let's catch up with Tim, learn a little bit more about him, as well as these 10 cars he picked that are flying under the radar. All right, I'd like to welcome Tim Harris to the Collector Car Podcast. Tim is new to our podcast as a guest. So, Tim, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself before we dig into some of these cars?
Well, that's always a question. Where do you start? I mean, should I start day one in March 9th, 1970, or do you want something more advanced than that?
Why don't we condense it down a little bit, hit the points
Sure.
that relate to cars?
I grew up with a car-loving father who got me thoroughly addicted to cars, and he had a car leasing company in Worthington, Ohio called Old Worthington Leasing. And we had this tiny little 1,300 square foot house. And my dad had a leasing company called Old Worthington Leasing. And so when I was growing up in the 80s, he'd always have a lot of really cool off-lease cars. And he would bring these cars home every weekend. So this was before leasing was a thing. No one had heard of leasing. He was one of the first independent automobile leasing companies in the country. And so he would have we had this little 1,300 square foot house, a little 3-bedroom house. And in our driveway, I have memories of him having like a 928, a 911. There's this one time I have a picture of it where he had my mom's 84 Volvo 240 DL. He had an 86 Rolls Royce. We had a 928, and we had a brand new at the time, like 87 911 Targa. And in his garage, he had his Triumph TR3. So fortunately, it was a long driveway, but to this little dinky house. And like two of these cars, or really one of the cars, was worth more than the house. But I mean, he had no car lot. So these cars would come off lease, and there was no system at the time to dispose of the cars. And so dad would fix them up and he would try to sell them because, and what would happen is he'd bring these cars home and he and I would clean and detail them. And I love doing it. I still love doing that. And, we'd spend a whole Saturday and Sunday cleaning and detailing them. And then dad would put them for sale, and then he would split if there was any profit with the owner of the car. So, he did all this as part of his service. He never made any money from doing all of this, but it was still a great, experience for me in my formative years. So
That's awesome. Yeah. That's great because you never knew what was going to show up, right?
Never.
You got to experience the cars, enjoy the cars, and then something else showed up.
Yeah. And this was back in the era where Mercedes were all screwed together. You could see the Phillips head screws, and it's kind of a bygone era in this disposable car era. It's age of disposable cars. But so yeah, and so we would just do different things. We would go to different car collections, kind of like what you do for a living, Greg.
All right.
I remember there's a guy named Hopalong Cassidy, and his family owned a junkyard. He also was a famous OSU football player, and they had a really, really sweet old Porsche collection. And one of the cars they had was one of this wasn't something that we were interested in, but I'm passing this along because it was sort of interesting. In Columbus, Ohio, of all places, they had one of Hitler's original parade cars.
Oh, wow.
In a warehouse in Columbus, Ohio. This was funny. We went down to the old Ohio Penitentiary. It is what you think it is. And inside, somebody had bought out all of DeLorean. So inside the Ohio State Penitentiary were, it's a freaking jail, right? So prison cells full of junk of, DeLorean stuff, not John DeLorean people. I'm not insulting.
He was in another jail. No.
Yeah. Well, it was incredible. So that was my, growing up years. And I have loved cars ever since, honestly.
Was that the same jail that was Shawshank Redemption in Mansfield?
No, this was in Columbus, Ohio, but it was just as bad. Yeah. And for a while, I worked at True Sports, which was Bobby Rahals. It just during the summer, because I love cars. And then I would, when I was a kid, I'd buy and sell cars. We'd buy and sell them, clean them up, fix them up, and Hondas and BMWs and things like that, little cheapies, but yeah, so I've loved cars my whole life.
That's awesome. And we met because you listened to the podcast, and we met in, was it Monterey?
Yeah.
Monterey.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Yeah. It's great to put a face to a listener. So I really do appreciate that. And we've become friends since then. And now you're on the podcast. So I really appreciate it.
And you almost, from one of my referrals, sold a Michael Schumacher Formula One car.
That's true.
Yeah.
That would have been great. Yes. Yeah. No, I appreciate it.
He's still in the market. But Greg, he's still in the market too. So keep that guy's phone number.
Okay. I will. So he was not the winning bidder of the sealed bid, which
he would have totally put it in my face if he was. Trust me.
That's hilarious.
The 100% would have told me about it. Yeah. So no, he wasn't, but he will, I'm sure, buy another one.
Well, it's funny because he did go radio silence on the text string, so we weren't quite sure
Um,
what was happening there.
well, who knows? But I mean, the thing with the Ferrari game, I mean, Julie and I, my wife and I, we've been married for 33 years and we've had hundreds of cars. Obviously, it's a problem. But like in the Ferrari game, if you want to skip the line, the easiest way to do it is to have a modernish Formula One car. So if you have a modernish Formula One car and it's something that won races, and Ferrari wants to display it, especially in Maranello, which then you can pretty much beyond VIP. There's six statuses, the Ferrari customer thing. So yeah, and that's what our mutual friend is going to try to do again because he sold his car
Right.
and all of a sudden he was just ordinary customer status. So I
Yeah,
think
we don't
it's
want to
like
be
that.
an ordinary customer. Jeez.
So
Okay.
yeah.
Whatever it takes, right? Awesome. Well, tell us what is one. You can tell us more if you want, but one of the cool cars that's in your garage that's one of your favorites.
Uh, I mean, we have Julie and I together, fortunately, she loves cars too. We have a very eclectic collection. We have I'll tell you one of my favorite ones that I've ever owned, and we just got it last summer. Probably a car that's going to ruin me for almost all their sports cars the rest of my life.
Oh, wait a
I could
second.
say this,
Should I
huh?
guess? Should I
Yeah,
guess?
yeah.
All right. Give me a description without telling me what it is. It'll ruin you for the rest of your life.
For all their sports cars, because for me, it's peak sports cars. You probably watch this on Instagram, so you know what it is. So you're going to cheat.
I haven't been on Instagram in a while.
Okay.
I know you're a Porsche guy. That almost seems too easy. All right. I'm going to pick the easy one, the Porsche ST.
No, no. We had
Oh,
a new Touring, but we sold it. I didn't like that car, honestly. I didn't think the new 992 Touring. We had a 991 Touring too, and that car was, in my humble opinion, a lot better as far as a driver's car. No, it's a 718 Spider RS.
really? Okay. I
Yes,
could see that. Yeah. I
drive
could
one.
totally see that because I got Jenny a little 2005 Boxster S, and
Yeah,
it has 2,100 miles on it when we bought it, and that's your car's decades ahead in
yeah.
technology and power and everything else. I was just so impressed with that 2005. Can't even imagine what the new one's like.
Well, but it's got the GT3 motor in it, and you can hear
Yeah.
all the mechanics of it. That's the thing that's really about the Spider is you can hear all the mechanical bits and pieces like a race car. Because I've done some amateur racing, and one of the things, like I'm not very good at it, but hearing all the mechanics, the gears in the transmission, and all just the different aspects of the motor doing its thing, you can hear that in this Porsche right behind your ear. And it's really, if you're into that sort of thing, it's loud, it's snarly, it's not even trying to be polite. It's, totally the whole thing. I can't believe Porsche made it, honestly.
So that's the GT4 RS, correct?
No, ours is a Spider. So ours is the Spider like your wife's Boxster.
Oh, okay. I didn't
Yeah.
realize they made one like that. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's
Very
got the
cool.
origami top, but it's the same
Oh
thing as
yeah. Yeah.
it's the same thing as the GT4 RS. So like I don't like to buy cars that we're not going to drive. And if I buy something that's just I've been seduced into buying cars that I thought I was going to drive, but I didn't, and I was buying them more for the financial upside. And I can give you a long list of those types of cars too, where I thought, oh, this is going to be the thing, and then I get it, and my brain shifts to because the value starts to increase, and that kind of ruins the experience. So now at this phase of my car collecting obsession, it's not even really collecting; it's more using. I think we've got how many cars we have? 14. I think. Do we? Can you count them up? Anyway, so uh the Spider RS checks all the boxes because it's fun to drive, it's loud, it's snarly, and all good things. Beyond that, I think the next one that the one that I'm thinking of, which one would I be the least likely to want to sell? Yeah, okay, I'll do that one later. We have a 73 RSR, but it's
Hmm.
not original RSR. This one was built by a guy named John Gunderson, and it's got a motor in it was built by a guy named Jay Lee. So basically, the car was never intended to be for sale. We found out it was for sale, or maybe for sale for the right money would be the better way to say it. We saw some pictures and we just bought it right over the internet. This was back in 3 or 4 years ago. And that car, every time, like, it's in North Carolina, And when someone is changing the oil, I used a couple places to service it, Ingram and things like that are going to be servicing it for us. They're like, holy crap, do you realize the work and money that went into this thing? So, but driving a car like that and driving the RSR, those experiences are really what it's all about. I'm not planning on going to the track or anything like that.
Yeah. Yeah. Now, is the RS PDK only?
Yes. The
Because I think
Spider RS is PDK only.
yeah, because I know for the Cayman, I think the GT4 was the last manual you could get, correct?
You're
And
right.
the GT4 RS was PDK only.
Yep, you're
Still,
right.
that's a great setup. So
Those cars, like your wife's cars, those cars, in my opinion, are massively underrated, underappreciated. Porsche made a ton of them, but you talk about something that's just an absolutely brilliant, fun driver's car. It's it's the 911. It supposedly lives in the shadow of 911s, but having a ton of 911s, Julie and I we restored old 911s, most notably a 67 a 911S that we sold at Monterey a few years ago that used to belong to Magnus Walker. Anyway, honestly, the experience of driving a 718 Spire, because it's mid-engine, if you like to drive, is superior to a rear engine car because you can't beat physics.
I totally agree. I didn't buy this car. I didn't drive this car till I owned it when I was leaving because I knew I would love it, and I just couldn't believe the difference between that mid-engine versus rear engine. Just feels so planted. My wife loves it. That's the great thing is get your wife on board with the car she loves. She just said yesterday, she's like, I want to drive that car, but I can't right now because there's salt on the road and everything we don't want to deal with. So she's just aching to get back in it and tear down the road. So
Yeah.
yeah, she's
But
drinking the Kool-Aid.
oh, that's good. The old cars too, and it's not just because I'm 54, but it's just because I think the old cars I've grown to appreciate them more. Like we're having Rod Embry's building us one of his hot rods. Who knows when that's going to be done? You just don't ask. When you're in line, you're just
Right.
in.
Yeah.
Just he asks for money, you send it. That's basically the way it works. We're 90% done building a 56 Porsche 550 with a 547
Yep.
Corky motor, the whole thing. I'll tell you something that we both really love. We have a 93 Miata Mark One, which by
Oh
the way,
wow.
those are sweet little cars. Again, I
Yeah.
know if we get to it, we'll talk about potential collector cars that are going to have value, but that's definitely the top of our list. Yeah, all kinds of things.
Well, we do actually have to get to the list that you sent me. So you drive the cars, you don't invest in them anymore, but you've got some here that you feel are rare investment grade cars that are flying under the radar. Now, I eyeballed this briefly, and I agree with 90% of what you have here. So, why don't we kick it off? You want to start at the top?
Well, so as far as the most expensive ones, I'm not really sure. So I'm really curious when I was thinking about this, and I love to go to the auctions. I mean, that's my favorite thing. It's Monterey Car Week, Julie and I, and so I'd love to watch the price trends, but I really enjoy going to the auctions to meet the people. That's the passion for me, is just meeting all the strange and wonderful people and learning all their quirks and features. So I'm noticing that there's a big shift in the people that are at the auctions. You definitely a generational, shift is happening. And so I was, at the auctions in this last August, we were watching some of these cars that had just been nothing in terms of like people wouldn't even give them a second glance 5 years ago. And they're just starting to get started, I think, personally. So this is our list. And what I did, and I'm not sure. Yeah. So what we did is I think, probably the most expensive ones. And then we worked our way down to the inexpensive ones. It was funny because Julie and I were just talking about more that we wanted to add to the list, but we'll see. Like she's got something that she insists that I share with you and your listeners, but we'll get to that.
Awesome.
So I would say starting out, I wouldn't buy any of these cars if you're looking strictly to make an investment, because you're going to be better off to put the money in the S&P 500. Now, if you want to buy a car where you're not going to lose money or you have a chance of making money, I think that's what these lists are all about. Fair enough, Greg?
Yep, I agree. Yep.
All right. So the first one, and Julie and I actually watched these getting made in South Carolina, which was really trippy. A BMW Z1. I'm sorry, these were the German ones. I was thinking of the
I was about to say that's Z3.
Yeah, Z3, right. Well, frankly, I should have put the clown shoe on here too, the Z3 coupe, but I didn't. Anyway, so
the clown shoe. Yeah.
Yeah. The Z1s are really, really neat cars. The doors that go down into the sills. You can import them. There's a lot that are starting to come to the United States from Japan primarily. Really cool colors. I love I love the size of them, the history of them. And this is something, again, if you think about what's a modern equivalent to that weird Z1, there's really nothing. And so as far as those go, in the price range that they're currently selling, less than 100, really you can get a nice one for around 55 or 60 last time I looked, which was probably about 6 months ago. Seems to me like that's going to be a pretty good ownership experience. They made a total of 8,000. So that's an interesting little thing to consider too. What makes something collectible? Do you have an opinion on that, Greg? Like, where is there a secret number or like I mean,
You
you're
know,
back.
yeah, 8,000 is a lot, but you never see these things, especially in the US. They're quirky looking little things. If you drive up in one, it'll take a moment for people to realize it's a BMW, honestly. I mean, you got the little kidney grills, but it's just really kind of like Blade Runner-ish, it's just so different, especially with the doors. And they're also, I've seen these in quite a few odd colors, interesting colors you would never typically see. I've got one here that is finished in Funglib, which is almost like a light green, which features matching glib interior. So it's like, they're just funky little cars that you never see. And but they're cool. I totally agree with you, because I don't remember the last time someone brought up a BMW Z1 in a conversation from a collectability status. I mean, I know they're not the fastest thing. There's reasons why, but I do agree with you on this one.
So
I think,
they're probably going to be the BMW, the 80s BMWs, obviously the M3s, and some of these other BMWs that are older than that are really starting to find their day in the sun.
yeah.
And it seems like some of those the BMWs, certain BMWs are sort of following the path of the early 911s and the 80s 911s. So I wouldn't be surprised if the Z1 is a real winner. For how long, I don't know. I mean, it's going to have to find its own audience. So the next
Well,
one, go ahead.
real
Sorry.
quick on that. Yeah. So on the Z1, yeah, just look at the time frame, 1990 to 93. The BMWs of that era are really getting into their own, and they will continue to do so. And so as people get their M1s, as people get their Z3 or M3s, M5s, whatever, they want to
Exactly.
fill out their portfolio, and they'll be like, oh, there's a Z1, so I agree. All right, off to the second one.
The next one I think is a no-brainer, but still I'm surprised. These are really, I think last year, Greg, you'll know more about these than I do, but the Heritage Editions and just the 4 GTs, but the Heritage Edition GTs. We were at another auction in Monterey, and there was a guy there that already owned like 3 of them. And I think he bought one with no miles on it or almost no miles. It was Broad Arrow's auction, I think. And it was like the most expensive Ford GT ever. And I got to talking with him just a little bit, and he told me about all of his other ones. And, he's buying them because he loves them. But those cars are really exceptional, I think. Really special. I love this. Again, I'm a driver, so I love the size of them. There's enough exotic in there. And they didn't make a ton of them too. So I think that's probably, do you remember when these things were originally for sale? They couldn't give them away for 150 grand.
Yeah, I know. 150 grand. I have two of my friends that have 6 of the 7, or crazy collections. And yeah, the Heritage Edition is one they won't drive because they see the investment potential already, right? And I agree with you on that. They're soft right now. Like, you could probably get one for high 4s, low 5s, maybe not the lowest mileage in the world. They're a little soft right now, but I agree with you. I think that's going to continue to go up, especially the low mileage ones, which I hate as well because I drive cars, obviously. I have a friend that has 6 of these. He's missing the yellow one.
We're probably talking about the same guy, Greg.
Could
I
be.
mean, yeah.
Could be. And
But think about what
okay.
you just said. So in the price, so I didn't know what the current pricing trends were, but if you think about what you just said, a new 992 GT3 RS, of which they're making more than people know. I read, reliable or not, I don't know, that to meet demand, they're cranking out another 1,000 of these things, and I guess most of them are slated for the United States. Anyway, so if you look at the price point of those things are selling for 400 grand versus basically buying something like this, of which they made fewer than 350 cars total, seems to me like that's a no-brainer.
It is. And then it's the last of these, quote unquote analog cars, supercars. You look 50 years from now, will you be able to even drive some of these new Porsches because of whether it's the hybrid powertrain or the electronics or whatever? But yeah, I love this Ford GT. I love to
Do you
have
worry
one.
about saying that though? Do you worry about the nature of the future consumer not being able to drive a manual transmission?
No, because you can learn that in 15 minutes. I I feel you can.
If you have an old diesel Rabbit, basically with a ton of torque, you can, but yeah.
Right. Yeah. I tried to teach my niece who was 16, 15 and a half to drive manual on my 996 1999 911. And my dad got upset because he thought it was waking the neighbors in the retirement home. So we stopped.
Have you ever driven a 996 GT3?
I have not. No.
You've got to drive one of those. So I think they have ABS, but I know they don't have traction controls. Julie and I had one that was in speed yellow, and that car is, again, not on the list, but an absolutely brilliant car to drive.
I agree that. Yeah.
Yeah,
The 996 Gen. Yeah.
I agree, but you can steer it with the ass in because
Yeah.
there's no traction control. The only thing is if you listeners, if you buy one of those, make sure you check the tires because most of the alignments are, what is that, toe in? I forget where the inside of the front tire, and they burn, I know the rear tires, and they burn through the tires really fast. And if you look from the outside, it looks like a tread, but on the inside, you might be on the belts. Don't ask me how I know. Okay.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Next.
All right, so this next one too, I'm starting to see these creep in. The 968 Turbo S from 92 to 94. Those cars, there are only 14 produced. But there's a lot of Porsches like that are just very, very limited edition, hardly made any of them that fall into the same category. Is there more room on this one? Probably just because it's so rare. And there's a lot of Porsche people that like to buy just ultra rare things. But if you're going to get into one of these things, it's going to have to be something that's not been repainted, not been wrecked, all the rest of it. Because Germans, where most of these cars live, they drive their cars. They're not collectors like we are. They take care of them, but they drive them. So, for my money, I personally, it's on the list, but I wouldn't necessarily lean into that one. Do you have an opinion?
Yeah, I agree with this one. And I also would add to this the other Turbo S, the 97, 98 Gen. I can't remember if it was 1 year or 2 years only. But I sat in one of those in St. Louis the other day for a client, and it was gorgeous. And the S's, they're just so rare. And it's the very few Turbo S air-cooled Porsches out there, a lot of water cooled, but not, or liquid cooled, but not air cooled. So yeah.
Well, Greg, this is a 968 is the 944, right? I mean, so this is a water cooled car.
Right. Yeah. That's what I'm saying. Even the next gen, the 993, that Turbo S, I would put on this list as well. I think that's a little under.
Well, so those cars are fun to watch too, because those cars were real peaky in value. Those were selling in the 400s. Again, you'll know better than me, but I think those cars have come down to more reasonable starting price.
A little bit. Porsches really have bucked the trend of the softness recently, which I keep on expecting it to go down more, but it really hasn't. It hasn't.
The early long hoods, those are the only ones where you're going to see probably like our 67 911S slate gray with red interior. We took 2 years to restore. We did very little of the work ourselves. So we had the best restorers in California at the time do the restoration work. Marco from TLG, John did the body work. The right guy did the wheels, the interior, the whole thing. Had sport seats. So that car sold at Monterey it wasn't matching numbers. And I don't remember what year we sold it, but it sold for like 225 or 235 grand. That car recently, last summer, was for sale at Mecum and was a no sale at 185. Yep.
Did you want to buy it back?
I emailed them and they didn't email me back. I offered them what the last price was. And I guess Reggie Jackson owns it.
Okay. Interesting.
Yeah.
Wow. Interesting. Okay.
Next up, we have, again, this just made the list because it's kind of interesting. And I've been sort of watching these because there's certain bellwether cars in all price ranges that you can watch and you get a sense of what direction things are going. I don't know if you think like that necessarily, Greg, but there's certain, like we were just talking about 911s, and this next one is another one because this is something that people won't buy as a first car. They're going to buy it because they have a collection. It's a, late 80s, 89 through 91 Aston Martin, Barrage Zagato shooting brake. And that's going to be a shooting brake is basically a proper way of saying a station wagon. And I think these cars, I mean, you can there's only, 4 examples. I believe that at least one of them was in one of these famous Middle Eastern car collections. Do you remember, what I'm talking about?
Yeah. The Prince. Yeah.
Yes,
I know
exactly.
what you're talking about. Yep.
Yeah. So, that's going to be one of those things when you see those at auctions and whatnot that kind of tell you, it's like 300 SLs, you can kind of see what direction the market's going by seeing what how the bellwether cars are doing. And that on the extremes, I think a good bellwether, because people are only buying those things if they have garages full of other really cool things, in my
Yeah,
opinion.
typically, yeah, especially Aston collectors. Now, for the purpose of this is so rare, I don't have a picture of it available, but I will show a picture of other Aston Martin shooting brakes that are pretty cool. Some of them look a little heavy in the rear, but for the most part, they're pretty cool pieces.
So this next one, number 5, is a really cool car that unfortunately, I've never really explored, but I'm really getting interested in these Japanese cars. 94 through 97 Subaru Impreza 22B STI. And I think what really is surprising, and you see this happening with these Japanese cars, these things are selling what, 300 to 400 grand for a really nice one. And I think there was one that sold for $500,000. And this is happening on all these Japanese cars. And the whole 911 resto mod scene is now starting to move over. There's companies that are making Singer-esque 240Zs and things like this. So really what you're going to see when Greg and I, if we get there to the lesser expensive cars, you're going to see a lot of Japanese cars, because the market, it seems to me, is definitely moving towards those smaller sort of vintage Japanese cars, especially the Subarus and the Hondas. Those things were bolted together as well as anything from Germany. But yeah, so the STI would be the next one. What's your thought on that?
Yeah, this one I totally agree with. And there's one, I was meandering around with my day job back in the day in Vermont, and I was in Burlington. And anyways, Burlington. And whenever I travel, I would always Google classic cars, collector cars on Google Maps and see what popped up. And this racing shop popped up, and it said, I forgot what it was called, Vermont Racing, whatever. Well, it turns out it's Subaru's North American Racing Team shop.
Wow.
Vermont. And I'm drawing a blank on the guy's name. He runs the whole thing. He gave me a full tour. It's like, you could perform a surgery. It's so clean. They have their 18 wheelers that they're about to go to different races across the country. And in the lobby is one of these rare Subaru 22Bs. And I think it had delivery mileage only. And it was protected. You couldn't get up too close to it, but it had a placard talking all about it. And I'm like, I tried to get it for like Monterey or something. It just never worked. It's probably still there, but it's in the lobby, and it's probably the most perfect 22B in existence, if I had to make a guess. Yeah,
Probably.
totally agree. Yeah, I think I put it at well over $400,000. I think I said 450 to 550, something like that. So yeah, very cool. All right, next we got a Sprint Zagato. Tell me about this. These are pretty
Well,
little.
I mean, the Alfa Romeo SZ, you have a
Yeah,
picture, but I'm sure those things just look amazing, don't they? I think
yeah.
there was one of these on Bring a Trailer earlier this year. And I don't know, I probably didn't bid on it, but I'm sure I put it in the watch section. But I think personally, those things are beautiful. And again, look at the price point of those, 60 to 120. And so if I don't throw this in here at this point, my wife's going to give me the stink eye. There's so many Alphas that are the Alpha. Again, this is a lesser price point, but an Alpha 4C, those Alpha 4Cs, they've got their foibles, but man, Julie and I had 2 of those. And brilliant cars, all carbon fiber chassis, composite exterior, beautiful little car, small, wider than it probably needs to be, handles great, sounds amazing. And Julie, my wife's current car, which she absolutely adores, which I would be shocked if this didn't become a future collectible, would be a Giulia Quadrifoglio. And those cars are, they're basically, they are a Ferrari motor, basically, missing 2 cylinders. It was, engineering done by ex-Ferrari mechanics, the whole thing. And those cars are brilliant too, but that's a different list, maybe for a different day. So,
Yes.
but the Alfa Romeos in the United States, there's not very many that are still, unless you go back to the 60s. The ones in the 80s were, I don't know, kind of sketch. And the 4C, the 8C certainly, but the 8C, those seem to have, Greg, were those around 250 basically, and they just have stayed there?
Yeah. It's surprising because they are such beautiful cars. Yeah.
I mean, does that make sense to you, honestly, for that price point, 250 to 300? That's a lot of money. We're not saying it's not, but
No, yeah, I think, they're known for somewhat of a rough ride. I was actually on a rally where a guy who's a pretty mega collector, he had one. He absolutely loved it. It's such a beautiful little car. I don't know quite why they haven't really taken off. I do agree with you that this Alfa Romeo SZ, because 8792, we have a few of these running around, and if they have one, they're diehards. Like the alpha guys around here, they are really into their alphas for sure. They're
And
all
with the
about them.
price at the price point, there's very little risk. I mean, you're looking at the price of basically a base C8 Corvette, you know. So,
Right.
you
Yeah.
know, if the
You're
Corvette's going to depreciate, this will at least hold its value. That so
right.
that
Just as long as
yeah,
you have a good mechanic somewhere, you know. I mean,
yeah,
just to stay on top of the little stuff, you know.
exactly.
All
The
right, let's
next
go
one,
to. Oh, go ahead.
okay. Well, the next one is the one they never sold in the United States, of course, the Lotus Carlton, which is a really cool sedan. And I remember when they came out with these back in the early 90s, and they were all over the European magazines, you know, kicking M5's asses. And, you know, E34 M5s were the thing at the time. And yeah, those cars, again, are old enough now. You'll probably start seeing those that are left-hand drive in the United States. And those are great cars too. And they made less than 1,000 of those things. And it's got all the right DNA, checks all the boxes. The only reason I'd be a little nervous about this one is that they're four doors, and four doors, generally speaking, aren't that collectible, you know, so put that into the mix.
Yeah, this one threw me because I am not used to this car. This is a deep cut here for sure. Is it any relation to the Mercure? It kind of has that look to it.
The Mercure XR4 Ti. So those in the United States, we had one. Julie and I had one, a white or silver. No, it was gray. A guy traded his Mercure XR4 Ti when we were in college flipping cars on a 1981 BMW 321. I'm sorry, a 1981 E21 323 Hartke H3. So that's high nerd for anybody in the BMW world. So we had one of those, and the guy had a Mercure, and we took the Mercure in on trade. Anyway, that's how we paid through college. So the Mercure was, if I remember correctly, in Europe, those cars had Cosworth motors in them. And I think they were 2.3 liters, individual throttle bodies, the whole thing. And in the United States, they put the Mustang SVO motor. I'm pretty sure I'm right.
Yeah. Looks like there's no connection, but boy, they do look a lot alike.
Yeah.
Just physically, they look a lot alike. All right, let's go to the next one. So we have three more. Now, when you sent your list to me, I was thinking we had like 3 podcasts worth of material here. So let's save the other stuff for later. Let's just go through the list of 10, and then we'll have you on again to go through the other stuff, if that's okay with
Sure.
you.
Yeah, it's great.
75 to 76 Ferrari 365 GT4 BB. All right, let's go for it.
Well, I mean, it's basically the car that came before the 512 BB. And so the 512 BBs now are finding their market. And of course, the 512 was a precursor to all the modern day Ferrari supercars. But this one in particular, I'm surprised doesn't show up very often. You'll see big, like Jay Lee in California has a big Ferrari collection, and he'll have every supercar. But a lot of these guys don't go, when they're doing their supercar collections, they never go past, or F40 is the oldest thing you'll see. You very rarely see a GTO. You very rarely see a 512B. And these cars, again, you have to have a Ferrari mechanic for sure. But that's a badass car, especially for the money. And you can find these cars. I wouldn't buy one that was needy. That's for damn sure. And this era too, you're going to be dealing with, I think Ferrari didn't start galvanizing their production cars until 78 or 79. So you're going to, a lot of mechanical issues, obviously you're going to have to, the whole thing. But for $300,000 to $500,000, again, yes, that's a lot of money, but it does feel like that these big collectors of these, I have every Ferrari supercar. Well, you don't unless you have one of these. And it seems to be overlooked, and it can't last forever.
They're so, looking from the outside in, it takes a trained eye to say, hey, no, that's a 512, like it's very similar, exterior wise, but just a beautiful car. It's got slightly different angles to it. Yeah, maybe it is the galvanized piece, the cost of restoration that's kind of kept these suppressed for so many years. But yeah, that's a great one to look at. All right, what do you have? Okay,
Greg, these are micro markets, right? So if you have somebody, you're in the business. If you have a few guys. Well, do you remember what was it? 2 years, 3 years ago? Do you know GT4s? Ferrari GT. So those little squared off things that I personally love. Those were overlooked. No one liked them. All of a sudden, a couple knowledgeable people publicly were trying to just talk them up. And boom, those things went up in value. Now, I think they've come back down again, but the Ferrari world definitely, especially in the old cars, definitely has those trends, those peaks and valleys that you don't necessarily see what the other makes. Like in 911s, you don't see that kind of huge peaks and huge valleys because there's so fewer people chasing the cars, which actually
Right.
goes to a lot of the components of when I was putting this list together. If you want to chase something that's weird that nobody else is going to want, or like if it wasn't popular when it was new, chances are it's not going to be popular now or ever. So you got to look for something that's low production. First of all, something you love and you can have passion for. If you get stuck with it, you're okay with it.
Right.
Something that you can ideally get serviced. All these things. So put it all into the mix. But if you're looking for the real way of knowing whether something's going to be collectible or not, start with how many they made, and then move towards they call it in the business world TAM, the total addressable market. So if you're really sensitive to losing money on cars, and if you want to maximize your probability of return, I don't think you're going to do much better than probably a variety of different 911s. But if you want to meander into something that's a little bit more specific, like our next car, 1998, number 9 is 1998 Mercedes-Benz CLK GTR, and I can't pronounce that, but it's Strasser version, I think. And that car's
Got to do German Strasser version.
yeah. But those
That's
cars
my best attempt.
yeah, but look at those. Those cars are crazy, right? And
Yeah, I'm 100% on board with you on this one because it's been a little while ago, but I did a podcast about what is the next, or no, I did a presentation at a social car club, and it is like, what is the next Ferrari GTO, meaning 1962 Ferrari GTO? Like, which is the next car that has the potential to appreciate to such extreme measures? And obviously, the McLaren F1 is already there.
Yep.
But this is its competition, and I would make the Porsche argument as well. But go ahead.
No, I agree. I agree completely. And again, it's got that product. So I'm again at another auction, and I'm talking with a very well known, Bruce Canepa, and he is looking at a 964 RS. I don't have one. I'm interested in one. And I'm asking him, I didn't realize it was Bruce, right? I was just talking to this guy standing next to me. Like I said, I like to talk people up at car auctions. It's my favorite thing. And he starts giving me all this information about it and telling me about, again, I didn't know who he was. And I was grateful that the stranger is giving me all this information. And this car was priced at, it was an RM auction. It was priced at 350 grand, basically. This was an auction in Florida, if I remember correctly, right before COVID. Now I'm remembering. And the same month as COVID, March. And so anyway, he said to me, they made a lot of them. That's what he said to me. I said, so what do you think these are going to do as far as values go? And he goes, they made a lot of them. And I didn't ask any follow-up questions. And then I researched it later, and they did make a lot of them. They made 2,500 911 RS or 964 RSs. And that really, so if you're, when you're thinking about buying something, if you're going to buy a 964 RS, for example, or any of these cars, if they made more than probably 600, I asked Greg earlier what his magic number was, and I've been able to observe, it's 600. Basically, if there's more than 600 made, then you're starting to basically run into the perils of supply and demand in terms of the viability of it being a good long-term buy and hold car. Again, I know that's not everyone's thing, but if it is, so 964 is a great driver's car. I wouldn't put a 964 RS, for example, in the guise of a collector car, something that's going to be a good, that's ever going to beat the S&P 500. But I think the next one is, and that's car number 10. You like my segues? I'm working on that.
Yeah. Well, before we go to 10, let's talk about the GTR a little more.
Okay.
Like 25 units.
Yep.
Le Mans history, or, international racing history.
It's
right?
a race car. Yeah.
But is this the street league? This is the street legal version, correct?
Yes, of which they never obviously sold these any place. Probably all of them are still living in Germany. I imagine Germany and the Middle East.
Well, we had two, believe it or not. We had two at our Las Vegas sale last year. And that was nuts because it was the Roadster version. I don't think they called it a Spider. I think they called it a Roadster. And I wasn't there when they did this, but they drove them down. They had to move them like down the Las Vegas strip, like half a mile or something. And I talked to one of the guys that drove it, and one of our previous podcast guests, Thatcher. And he's like, man, you wouldn't believe it. It's like we were in two UFOs, people pulling out all sorts of camera to get not just one, like one would have that effect, but to have two go down the road at the same time, both silver, one, one's the hardtop, one's a convertible Roadster. And I think they sold around 9 to 10 each. I think one sold at 9 and one was a no sale that sold later. So Anyway, it's just crazy cars, and you have I think it's called the GTR one. Anyways, the Porsche version. The Mercedes, in my mind, is much more attractive looking than the Porsche version, because it did have the fried egg headlights and such. But anyways, all right, let's go to number 10.
If you don't mind, I have a thought or a question. What percent, in your opinion, of people buy a car, and I'm going to use a modern term, as a flex, right? As a show off. If you had to
A
guess,
lot.
I would go with a lot too. Jules and I were in Monaco, and that whole place was just nothing but flex,
Yeah. Yeah.
But I would think a lot. Would you say 9 out of 10, 8 out of 10 of these hypercars, supercars are just bought as essentially a flex?
I'd say probably 8 out of 10.
Okay.
There's some hyper collectors that really want them for what they are.
I agree, but very few of them are actually given a hoot about driving them, and that's what I think makes that Mercedes extra special too, because it is literally a street race car. So if that's true, if a lot of the buyers out there are buying for a flex, if another, I think, interesting thought to have would be what classic cars would outflex the modern super flex car, right? I mean, if you're thinking about what's going to be potentially a good return on investment. Again, I'm not really comfortable saying it like that because I like to drive cars. But that would be, so for example, in Monaco, Lando Norris, he doesn't, he has a Lamborghini Miura SV. And the other cars he drives are, similar. He has an original Cobra. He has things like that. And so if you're in front of the casino, which was amazing, first time we'd been there, and you see all these Lamborghinis and you see this slew, like so many freaking Bugattis, it was just like, don't even turn and look. I mean, seriously.
Right.
And then somebody, rumbles up in a vintage car from the 60s. That guy owns the space. So I wonder, and I'm sitting here talking.
Yeah, Fiat Jolly.
He has a Fiat Jolly too. That's right. Yeah. It says a lot about the guy's character that he feels comfortable driving a Fiat Jolly in Monaco. I mad love and respect for that. In any event, so if you're right, which I think you are, that most of the buyers for cars like this are flexing, and if the ultimate flex is no longer a supercar, for example, Julie and I, we have a Ferrari GT, a 296 GTS, and we're probably going to get the BS version of it. So we're down at the dealership talking to the owner of the store, and it doesn't matter. And, we were talking about how fussy Ferrari is to work with, a lot of the rules and whatnot. And then I made the comment, I said, well, if it wasn't for the fact that Ferraris are hard to get, all these other manufacturers wouldn't be in existence, Koenigsegg and all these others. And he corrected me. And remember, this guy owns a Ferrari store. He said, those other car companies are in existence because the people that were buying the Ferraris aren't buying them anymore because they weren't unique enough. So I thought that was interesting. It kind of changed my thinking. And I think from an automotive perspective, we're into an era where it's very, very likely that really cool collector cars are going to become the ultimate flex for the next generation because the Lamborghinis and all the others have just become too ubiquitous. Do you have a thought on that?
I agree with you. I haven't really thought it through, but I think that is totally correct. It's always, it's always the unique and interesting that people don't typically see. One example I'll give is I was at a Cincinnati Concours d'Elegance hangar party. It's a couple of years ago, and a guy rolls in with his, whatever it was, hyper Ferrari. And I asked him, why do you have that and not like a Lamborghini? And his response goes directly to flexing. He said, because anybody can buy a Lamborghini. No, you have to be somebody to buy a Ferrari. That famous quote that I forgot who gave it, but yeah, he had a Ferrari, not because he necessarily wanted a Ferrari, but he wanted people to know that he could get a Ferrari, and that's a really interesting question about, kind of what is that next thing, especially if you go backwards and you go back to, the classic era. That's a tough one because I think a lot of that has been mined. If it's going to do it, it's already been doing it, but I don't know. I'm curious.
Well, we're mixing cool factor. Like if you buy a new anything, like new Ferraris, modern Ferraris, they're depreciating. So
yeah,
the Ferrari jacked up the price. The cars aren't holding value. So the idea that buying a Ferrari is going to be essentially a cost-free experience is out the window. Doubt if it's going to swing back the other direction. And all these other cars depreciate. So to rationalize, again, we're making this about money, which is again not, whatever, but to argue against the old cars because the old cars require maintenance and the new cars don't, and some of the new cars, like for example, the Ferraris would increase in value from the day you bought them. Those arguments don't hold value anymore. So I think
Right.
unless you're buying like an 812 Competizione or you're getting, but you have
Right.
to get an allocation for one of those. So in any event, I think it's very reasonable to assume that this younger generation of folks are getting burned out on all these supercar, hypercars everywhere you look, especially online. Social media has essentially
Yeah.
made, I mean, I'm older than you, Greg. And when I was, car magazines, and if you saw a new 911, man, that made your freaking week. I remember
Yeah.
my dad leased an 87 red, Guards red 911 turbo. And oh my gosh, I still think about it, obviously. But now, I mean, you see special stuff all over the place, but you don't see old special stuff. So I think
Yeah.
we could see a new generation discover these old cars, not because of nostalgia, but because they're looking for a new flex. And I bet you that's what happens. I've been looking for signs of that. But that's my theory.
It's funny, and we'll have to move on here in a second, but I've heard rumblings and seen people talking about, believe it or not, brass era cars is what
Yep.
some of the young kids are getting into. Because I think the more the industry gets electrified, the more people want not electrified, and they want stuff they can work on, and they want the weird stuff nobody ever sees. And, they're even going all the way back to brass era, which I find really, really cool and interesting,
Me
that some
too.
are making that jump. All right. The last one here, and then I want to add one at the very, very end. So tell us about the number 10.
Again, I've never driven one of these, but I've always admired them. It's the De Tomaso Pantera GTS, the arched fenders and all that from 71 to 73. A lot of cool stuff about these things. And again, I think it's obvious that these things are underpriced, 150 grand to 250 grand. And if you poke around, you can find one that's needy, but strong advice to all of you or suggestion to all of you is try to buy something that's not needy because the cost of bringing something up, is ridiculous. It doesn't matter what it is. And I realize this has an American motor and the rest of it, but still it's going to be really expensive. So buy the nicest one you can afford. And if you can't afford a nice one, I'll suggest you not buy one at all. So, I learned the
Yeah,
hard
this
way.
one, yeah, this one's interesting because the Panteras, they're hot, they're 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 tight. You don't have a lot of room with your feet, hard to see out of, but they're gorgeous, and they're reliable because they're American Ford V8 in the rear engine. And this is one of the rare ones in which modern amenities or customization doesn't affect the price as much as it would on other cars of the same era. And so if you go out and find one, I would find one that's already had the heating issues fixed, has had maybe vintage air put into it. There's a couple, I mean, it's well known in the Pantera community what needs to be done and what needs to be fixed to make these really great running driving cars. And they're cool. I mean, I saw there's one running around here locally. He keeps the engine bay cover out. It's meant for like storage. It's just a big plastic or fiberglass thing. So you can see the whole engine and it's all chromed out, and he has slightly larger factory looking chrome wheels on it. Gorgeous cars. But to your point, get one that's done, get one that's sorted, get one that has those issues addressed. And I don't think you can go wrong. The one I wanted to add, I think one of your opinion on it is the Fiat 500 Abarth.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Yeah, like I don't know the years, like 2005, 2006, whatever it is, even later, 2010 maybe.
Oh,
I
you
don't know
mean
the
the
years.
modern ones? You mean the
Yeah,
modern
yeah, the
ones?
modern
Oh
ones, the
yeah.
modern ones.
I
I
love those cars.
I have there's a guy that runs a restoration shop, and he has one, and he's got like 100,000 miles on it. He cannot stop raving about it, and the guys that work there can't stop raving about it. I know there was an interview with Jerry Seinfeld. He can't stop raving about his, and you know, you don't see it on anybody's social feed or anything. I think that's one that people need to take a look at now because you can get one with low mileage with not much expense at this point.
For like 10 grand. Have you driven one?
I have, and man, it just sounds great. It just scoots. It almost is kind of like an early Mini Cooper S,
Which
like
we
the
also have. We have a 67 Mini Cooper S with that's got great history, and you're exactly right. That's what it feels like.
yeah,
Those
yeah.
cars have no mufflers, the R-Barths, they're just straight through exhaust, basically. Do you
No,
know?
no, I didn't. That's why they sound so great.
Oh my gosh. The first time Julie and I saw those is before they started selling them in the United States. We were actually in Italy, and I remember there was just a red one. It was parked somewhere in Rome, and oh my gosh, it looked so amazing. And I
Yeah.
100% agree with you. Those cars, and there's a really good aftermarket for those too. So you know, if you can't find parts, if you can't find, there's enough people out there that can keep them running. Those are great cars. I 100% agree. Those in the future will be fantastic. They have all the elements of something truly special. They make those in, you know that they had shit, I don't remember, sorry. They had different renditions of those. There was one that was a Ferrari version. I'm forgetting the number. I think 575 or something. Do you know about all those special editions they sold?
Yeah, you're right. They did. Or 599 maybe? Like
Yeah.
yeah,
595. Yeah, whatever.
yeah, something like that. Yeah. If you can find one of those, even better, right? You know,
I
super
agree.
rare. Well, hey man, I appreciate it, Tim. Thank you.
Yeah,
We're
of
going to
course.
save all this other great stuff you sent me for another podcast. Now, if my listeners wanted to learn more about you, is there a way they can find you?
Uh, well, I mean, I suppose Instagram, right? You could it's Tim and Julie Harris, just at, you know, on Instagram, Tim and Julie Harris. We put car pictures up occasionally. You know what, honestly, Greg, if someone wanted to text me, it's fine. I love talking about cars. Just, they better be ready to talk with someone who's an obsessive. Um, they can text me, don't call, but it's 512-758-0206.
You know, I think you're the first person that ever put their phone number on my podcast, and this is like number 450 or something, or 350 or something like that. So, hey, how about that?
So Julie and I have a podcast for real estate agents. It's the number one podcast supposedly in the United States. We have, you know, millions of downloads every year. And I give my cell phone number for a variety of reasons, my actual cell phone number. And I was fearful originally that people would abuse it. And it's just the opposite. They're respectful. They will be more considerate of what they're going to say, and the more thoughtful as far as, you know, being to the point, which is fascinating because it's not the human behavior I would have anticipated.
Well, thank you for answering my text then, since you get.
Of course. See, for example.
Well, thank you so much, Tim, for being on the Collector Car podcast.
Of course.